How did an entire army, made mostly of papier-mâché and inflatable tanks, manage to fool some of the best-trained German soldiers during World War II? Imagine a battlefield where the enemy's fear was stoked not by bullets or bombs, but by shadows and smoke. This isn't a story about brute force or explosive battles. It's about brains, guts, and a little bit of Hollywood magic that changed the course of history in a way most people don't even know about. It all started in 1943, deep in the sweltering deserts of North Africa. The Allies were locked in a deadly chess match with Rommel's Afrika Korps. Every inch of ground mattered, and every movement was watched closely through enemy eyes and cameras. Now meet Colonel Dudley Clark, an intelligence officer with a flair for the dramatic and a mind that thrived on deception. He wasn't interested in facing the enemy head-on. Instead, he believed the key to victory was to outsmart them, to make them see what wasn't there. Clark assembled a ragtag team of artists, engineers, and soldiers. Their mission? Create an entire fake army. But not just any fake army. A ghost force that looked so real the Germans wouldn't dare attack it. Giant inflatable tanks, wooden jeeps, fake artillery, and even dummy soldiers posed as an advancing force. At night, searchlights mimicked headlights, and campfires were faked with controlled fires. From the air, it was a convincing mirage. One of the men on the ground, Sergeant James "Jimmy" Harrison, was in charge of the actors. He was no soldier of the front line, but his nerves were steel as he stood amidst this theater of illusion, knowing the enemy might be watching every move. Jimmy knew their lives depended on this dangerous game of shadows, but could this fragile, inflatable army really change the outcome of a war? Or was it just a clever distraction doomed to be blown apart by real firepower? The Germans were about to find out, and what happened next would shock everyone. Would you risk everything on a lie? Because soon the desert was about to become a stage for the most daring trick in military history. So here's where things start to get really interesting. The fake army, officially called Operation Bertram, wasn't just some random collection of props. Every detail was meticulously planned to fool German reconnaissance planes and spies. The timing was crucial. It wasn't enough to build something that looked real. They had to make it believable in motion. Sergeant Jimmy Harrison and his team worked day and night, moving the inflatable tanks slowly across the desert, dragging them behind trucks to leave convincing tire tracks in the sand. Smoke generators puffed out black clouds to simulate burning engines or artillery fire. From high above, the Germans saw a massive buildup of Allied forces seemingly preparing for a massive attack in one location. But here's the twist. The real Allied tanks and troops were quietly moving miles away under the cover of darkness to launch their actual assault at El Alamein. While the Germans focused on the fake army's threat, the real soldiers were creeping up on their flank, ready to strike. Imagine the tension in those moments. On one side, Colonel Dudley Clark and his crew held their breath, knowing that if the illusion was blown, they'd be sitting ducks. On the other, the real forces were counting on this ruse to save their lives and turn the tide of the Desert War. And then came the moment when German commanders, fooled by what they saw, shifted their defenses to meet the phantom threat. Instead of preparing for a true assault where the Allies actually were, they scrambled to counter the fake army. The courage it took to stand in the middle of this staged battlefield knowing you could be exposed at any second is almost unimaginable. Jimmy Harrison later recalled the eerie feeling of watching real German planes fly overhead, knowing they could spot the truth at any moment. Yet, the fake tanks stood firm, and the illusion held. This wasn't just a clever trick, it was a bold act of ingenuity that showed how creativity and nerve could rewrite the rules of warfare. But what happened when the Germans finally realized the truth? Would the deception be uncovered too late, or would it all come crashing down in a deadly showdown? When the sun rose over El Alamein on that fateful morning in October 1942, the German commanders were still convinced that the main Allied attack would come from the area swarming with those fake tanks and wooden artillery. They had shifted troops and armored divisions to counter this phantom threat, leaving their flank dangerously exposed. What happened next is almost surreal. The real Allied forces, hidden under a blanket of silence and darkness, launched a massive offensive that caught the Afrika Korps completely off guard. Tanks roared across the desert, infantry surged forward, and artillery hammered the unsuspecting enemy lines. The Germans, already stretched thin by trying to defend against the Ghost Army, couldn't mount an effective counterattack. Sergeant Jimmy Harrison and Colonel Dudley Clark watched from their concealed posts as their gamble paid off. The fake army had done its job. Without firing a single shot, it had saved lives, won critical time, and shifted the balance of power in a brutal conflict. For the Germans, the realization was crushing. They had been outwitted not by firepower, but by human ingenuity and sheer nerve. The humiliation was bitter, but it also spoke volumes about the strange humanity of war, that sometimes survival depended not on killing, but on deception, trust, and the courage to believe in a lie. In the aftermath, Clark's Ghost Army became a symbol of redemption for those who had felt powerless in the face of overwhelming odds. Soldiers who had once been afraid of the desert's harshness found strength in their creativity. They learned that courage comes in many forms, not just charging into battle, but standing firm in the shadows, knowing the world might never see the sacrifices made to keep the illusion alive. This incredible story reminds us that war isn't always about brute force or heroic charges. Sometimes it's about the quiet bravery of those who risk everything on a plan so bold it seems impossible. What would you have done if you were standing there, surrounded by fake tanks, knowing that the fate of thousands depended on a fragile illusion? Would you have had the courage to hold the line without firing a shot? If this story moved you, share your thoughts below. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more untold tales from history that reveal the heart and soul behind the headlines. The desert sun kept beating down, but something had changed, not just in the sands of El Alamein, but in the hearts of those involved. The Ghost Army wasn't just a military trick, it was a testament to human ingenuity under pressure. Colonel Dudley Clark's vision and Sergeant Jimmy Harrison's steady hands had shown that even in war's darkest moments, creativity and courage could rewrite the rules. After the battle, the real tanks rolled forward into history, but the story of the fake army quietly faded from public view. Yet those inflatable tanks and wooden guns had done more than deceive the enemy. They reminded us that war is deeply human. It's filled with fear and hope, failure and redemption, and the endless struggle to find a way through impossible odds. Think about that for a second. Men and women risking their lives not by charging guns blazing, but by standing firm in a world of shadows and smoke. They were actors on a battlefield stage, playing a part that saved lives. And in that, there's a profound kind of bravery, a quiet heroism that often goes unnoticed. The Ghost Army is a powerful reminder that sometimes the greatest weapon isn't firepower or numbers. It's the courage to imagine something different, to dare to outthink your enemy, and to trust in the power of a well-told lie. So, what would you have done if you were there? Would you have had the patience, the nerve to hold your ground, knowing you might never fire a single shot? Could you bear the weight of that strange kind of courage, the one that comes not from fighting, but from fooling an enemy into surrendering before the first bullet is fired? Thanks for joining me on this incredible journey through one of history's most daring deceptions. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts below. Because sometimes the best stories are the ones that make us ask, what would we do if we had to choose between bravery and survival?